Reddit's long-awaited IPO is finally here, and with that, we believe, comes lots of newbie investors, and that's because people who use Reddit on a regular basis and find value in the platform are likely to think that it's probably a good investment. Now, that's a form of domestic bias, and if you weren't an investor prior to Reddit's IPO, you need to be very careful, and especially if you're an investor in the stock. Be prepared for lots of volatility. That's because initial public offerings are inherently volatile, especially ones that are hyped quite a bit or talked about a lot. Now, Reddit's IPO, by the way, the ticker is RDDT, has traded up as much as 70% over its initial price offering of $34. Now, we have no dog in the race here. We're simply interested in looking at what the thesis is for Reddit. We're particularly curious about the training data, and we're also wanting to understand just what all the hype is about. So things we want to look at: how does this company make money? That tells us what exposure we're getting in our portfolios. What competitive moats do they have? How resilient are their revenue streams? And if you're a newbie investor and you're looking at Reddit, be very careful, because we saw this a lot with cannabis stocks, that you'll be attracted to the functionality of the platform rather than the merits of the investment that you're making. So what we want to do here is get in front of newbie investors and explore this company a little bit more. So how Reddit works, you're probably familiar with that. One of the top 10 to 20 most visited sites in the world. They have 60,000 people working for free as moderators, and that's a little concern there, because these individuals are going to be very vocal and have leverage over the company when they want to bring about change, perhaps to now have multiple masters, right? You have the users of the platform who are working for free, and then you have the shareholders who are demanding a return on their investment.
Do you have my money?
So there are lots of read and go users. So this metric here is what the company defines as a very strategic metric, and it's called a DAU-Q. So a daily active unique user is someone who has opened a Reddit application at least once during a 24-hour period in the last quarter. So logged in folks, 36.4 million, logged out 36.7. Now, the logged out people are a lot more difficult to harvest money from. That's worth noting. Whilst the logged in people, these are the true users of the platform, and you want to see these numbers go up. So on a business model like this, there's two ways that you can increase revenues. It's by increasing your users or increasing the amount of money you get from your users. We'll look at that in a second, what's called ARPU, average revenue per user. Now, the quarterly average, this is weekly usage, right? So individuals who have opened up Reddit in the last week over a quarter, at least within a week's time frame, of course, the number goes up, right? And what you can see here is pretty consistent. In terms of usage across their platform, about half the people come from the United States and half come from the rest of the world. And there's two distinct profiles there when it comes to harvesting money from these folks. Now, when we look at average revenue per user, we want to see that going up, though it will likely, because this is largely an advertising platform, hit some sort of plateau. The only way then, without increasing users, to increase your average revenue per user is to run more ads, and that'll piss people off. So you have to be very careful there. So there's probably some ceiling there. One could say, based on this chart, maybe it's been reached at around $3.50. But what's more interesting here is to look at that based on geography. So look at the United States. They're harvesting close to $6 per user. And then look at the rest of the world, somewhere around $1.30. And that holds true in advertising. So visitors from India aren't as valuable as visitors from the United States. That's just how advertising works. So when we look at what they call the multi-chapter growth strategy for Reddit, you see advertising there on the bottom, and the spectrum here shows current, emerging, and future. So we want to look at current, right? So advertising, that's pretty straightforward. 98% of their revenues come from advertising, though next year that's going to change, probably closer to 90%, because they're now licensing their data to companies that are developing large language models. That's what we're interested in. We'll look at that. Then there's this user economy potential monetization area that they'll need to be very careful there that they don't piss off their base. Now, before we get into talking about Reddit's business model more, I wanted to have a bit of a public service announcement here. So I worked in Wall Street for over a decade, and I learned that it's very difficult to generate alpha. 95% of investment managers can't beat a benchmark in the long run. So you need to get very creative when you look at beating the market. So what we did is we went on Fiverr and hired a Romanian fortune teller. Now, on our last video, she did a psychic audit and said that some of you watching this video aren't subscribed, and she recommended penalizing your alpha as a punishment. Now, I certainly don't want it to come to that, so I just asked that you all subscribe to this channel. And it certainly couldn't hurt to like this video and share it with your friends as well. For those of you who are wondering, we found that her alpha generating performance is on par, if not better, than other fund managers. So we don't run ads here at Nanalyze, and we're really looking for your support to help grow this channel. So Reddit's appeal to advertisers. For the last several years, as I said, 98% of their revenue was generated from third-party advertising. And the interesting bit here, of people who visited Reddit in the United States, many aren't using other forms of social media. So if you look at this chart here, you can see that, for example, 32% of the users on Reddit aren't using Facebook, and then read to the right. So 53% aren't using X, 87% aren't using Twitch. So there's these are unique. This is a unique audience for advertisers to reach. And then when it comes to demographics, around 41% between the ages of 18 to 34, 50% male, 64% had a household annual income of $75,000 or more. So it seems to be an appealing demographic to target. Of Reddit's top 10 largest advertisers, they only accounted for around 28% of revenue in 2022, 26 in 2023. So there isn't a customer concentration risk there. That's great. And then 90% of their advertisers used first-party Reddit data from user activity. So they're really looking at what you're doing on that platform to target you with perfect ads. And that, of course, they're able to sell better, and Reddit can sell ads better that way. Now, when it comes to international revenues, this is rather interesting. Last quarter, 50% of Redditors visited from outside the United States, right? Like we said, the revenue they brought in was $44.7 million from outside the United States. Now, what we can do there is compare this then to these other figures here. So if 98% of revenues came from advertising and they had $250 million in Q4 2023, then international revenues are 18% of total revenues, yet they account for 50% of users. Now, they're trying to say that, well, that number jumped 22% since the prior year. Yes, but if you take that as a percentage, it actually fell. So the percentage of total revenues that they received this last quarter was 17.88%. The previous quarter last year, say the same quarter last year, was 18.35. So they're going to have a problem trying to monetize international business. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But when we look at data licensing, so the idea here is that the data on Reddit's platform, because of their upvote mechanism, it sort of acts like a community notes function to validate data, though you need to be careful there, because if you're a Reddit user, you know how much humor and sarcasm goes into people's responses at times, at least in the comments section, and you wonder if algorithms are going to be able to understand that. And you also need to be careful about echo chambers, which appear to be prevalent on Reddit. These are people not in pursuit of the truth, especially in the investing community. Those people that use Reddit, we found that to be the case. Now, if everyone uses Reddit's data, it doesn't offer a competitive advantage. So the more they license it, the less valuable it becomes, presumably. Now, they describe this as in early stages, and we just go back to that comment that the more you start selling, the less valuable it becomes. And they provide some information about data licensing. So they entered a contract value of $203 million in terms ranging from 2 to 3 years. They expect next year, say this year, $66.4 million to be recognized from that. So from data licensing, so around 8% of 2023 revenues if they had the same revenues this year. That's about 8%. So not very much. You'd expect them to have more revenues this year, so data licensing will actually be less than that. Now, a lot of people say, well, Reddit's not profitable. True, but when you're looking at growth companies, you're really focused on revenue growth. And you can see here, this is from an article by Wired. Reddit's revenue is up, but growing more slowly. Indeed, so somewhere around 20% up. And they are incurring losses, but what you want to look at here, it's very important, look at gross margins. That shows you the potential they have to be profitable. So you see here, gross margins upwards of 85% are very good. What they can then do is start trimming the fat so they can get rid of that divisive employee research group tripe, lose the whole every employee needs to be seen, heard, and valued stuff and start focusing on performance. Just seems like a lot of fat can be trimmed from this company and bring them to profitability quite quickly. Now, because they're losing money, you want to say, well, how much runway do they have? So we look here. Net cash used in operating activities. That's the cash burn, right? And okay, so they burnt less cash in 2023. That's great, $75 million. And then you look at the cash on their balance sheet even before this IPO. Of course, they'll raise more. There's $1.2 billion. They're just in, there's no problems there at all. So you would want them to be focused more on growing than trying to get to profitability. Now, when it comes to using Reddit for investing, we found the stock research there is really one-sided and fairly policed, and we've had our own experiences on there. We were attacked one time from all sides for daring to say that Rocket Lab was overpriced, so we were spot on. Of course, it's crickets, right? Nobody comes around to say, oh, yes, you're actually correct. We found largely nothing but bullish echo chambers over there, and Reddit has helped propel meme stocks, which are an absolute joke, and this whole us versus Wall Street narrative, it's naive at best. So it's probably not good to take advice on investing in Reddit on Reddit, but certainly the platform has a lot of good use. Now, I'm old enough to remember when Wired used to be a good read. I'm even old enough to remember when Vice News used to be edgy. I think they're out of business now. But I just looked at Wired's page today and they say, why and how Wired is covering politics. Wired shouldn't be covering politics. Wired should be covering technology. So they've deviated from that. And it seems like lots of activists work as journalists there now. But this article from Wired was quite good. I was very surprised. It's titled, Reddit IPO Filings Reveal the Company's Hopes and Fears. And this gentleman here, Parish Dave, did a great job on this piece. I just wanted to point to a few things in this article. So it talks about how Reddit's 19-year history, they've been around for a while, has been a roller coaster of scandals over unsavory content, abrupt leadership changes, and user revolts. What does that mean? Lots of distractions, okay? That's problematic. He says, over the course of the unusual years-long delay, Reddit revised its initial investor pitch 10 times, and this is important, leaving a trail of edits. What you can then do there is take a look at that. You could do a diff on those and extract some really valuable information. So that's what this gentleman did. And the IPO papers have said since late 2021 that over 500 million people visit at least once a month. But nearly 3 years later, the figure cited hasn't grown. And the argument was, well, they're changed their way they measure. Well, that isn't good either. The amount of time Reddit reports that users spend with its service hasn't significantly budged either. So this is from that Wired piece. And Reddit reported that over two-thirds of all posts in late 2021 through 2022 were in English, and by the second half of last year, that grew to over 90%. So this idea of trying to appeal to an international audience, what they say, localizing your content, has proved to be very difficult. They talk about how logged out users tend to visit individual posts and then leave, which have fewer ads than news feeds that logged in users curate and scroll. So going back to that, the challenge there of getting people to actually log into the platform and use it rather than just coming by and sapping the content. So another concern there would be their dependency on Google, which is said to have declined. So if Google makes a change in their algorithms and that affects Reddit, that's a huge deal. They said there was an all-hands-on-deck emergency when that happened one time, and they vowed to make sure their dependency on Google was diminished, and they no longer provide that. But the last report in 2022 said that they had reached an all-time low of about 1 in 5 users coming via search results. Now, when it comes to valuation, we have what's called our simple valuation ratio. That's market cap divided by annualized revenues. Obviously, Reddit doesn't have positive earnings, so we use this form of a price to sales ratio. It comes in at 12, so that's based on their closing price of $50, market cap of $9.5 billion. That's twice our catalog average. It's quite rich, to be honest. So, but it's still not, I think 3 times our catalog average at 18 would be where we would draw the line and say, well, that's too richly priced. But to be honest, there's nothing really appealing about Reddit's business that would make us want to invest. We invest in 2 types of stocks, dividend growth and disruptive growth, and this doesn't seem to be that disruptive. So I'm going to go ahead and leave you with another video here. To all the newbie investors that have come around, thanks for visiting. And if you want to learn about some best practices in investing, I've put up a video here. This was from last year, but the message is timeless, and this has some very good lessons in it. So please make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this today.